Night fell over Mons with the sky streaked in fire. August 1914. The first clash between Britain's small expeditionary force and the massive German army. Soldiers dug into the mud, rifles trembling in their hands as darkness crawled over the fields. Then the night erupted: machine guns, shells, screams swallowed by thunder. In that chaos, men began to whisper. Some swore they saw them. Vast, glowing figures hovering above the smoke, shapes like medieval archers with drawn bows, halos of pale light framing their faces. Others spoke of armored warriors, their outlines burning like fire through the rain. German troops, advancing through the shattered houses, were suddenly thrown back, as if struck by a storm no one could see. The British soldiers who survived told it in fragments. Arrows flying where none should be. A line of ghostly bowmen standing where minutes earlier there had only been smoke. Some claimed the Germans fled in panic, not from bullets, but from the silent ranks of these radiant beings. Back in London, newspapers seized on the tale. The Angels of Mons, they called them. Proof that heaven itself had intervened to save the British army from destruction. Sermons thundered in churches. Pamphlets spread the miracle across the empire. A divine sign, they said. But there were questions no one could answer. Some officers insisted they saw nothing but the usual madness of war. Skeptics whispered about exhaustion, hunger, and nerves stretched to breaking hallucinations born of terror. Others suggested something darker, that the British government itself encouraged the legend, a spark of hope for a nation bracing for years of bloodshed. And yet, in the archives, in letters written by ordinary soldiers with no reason to lie, the same details repeat. The light, the figures, the sense of being shielded by something far beyond human. One diary entry, recovered decades later, described a wall of white fire standing between the Germans and the British trenches, a barrier of blazing forms the shells could not break. Another told of a soldier who claimed he felt a hand on his shoulder that night, cool, steadying, though no one was there when he turned. After the war, the debate only deepened. In smoky pubs and veterans' halls, men spoke of that night with a strange hesitation, as though unsure whether they had witnessed salvation or madness. A few swore the angels returned at Mons again in 1918, when the Germans were finally pushed back. Others believed it was mass hysteria, nothing more than the mind rebelling against terror. But the story refused to die. Even today, pilgrims leave flowers at the battlefields of Mons. Some say that on certain nights, when fog settles low over the grass, you can still see pale shapes moving silently through the mist. The vanishing Norfolk Regiment, August 1915. Gallipoli. The sun burned the cliffs white as the Norfolk Regiment marched inland through dry riverbeds and olive groves. Dust rose in golden veils around their boots. Above them, the sky was a hard, empty blue, except for the one thing every survivor remembered: a cloud. It hung low over the hills ahead, perfectly still while the wind tore at everything else. Not mist, not smoke. Too solid, too deliberate. Men watched it glint strangely in the sunlight, as if it had weight. The Norfolks kept marching. Into the hills, into the haze. Witnesses from other units later swore the entire column, more than 200 men, walked straight into that cloud. Their shapes grew pale, then blurred, then vanished entirely. Hours passed. The cloud drifted slowly toward the horizon. When it finally rose into the sky and dissolved, the hills lay empty. No voices, no movement. Not a single man from the Norfolk Regiment remained. Search parties scoured the ground for days. They found nothing. No rifles, no packs, no bodies. It was as if the earth had simply erased them. The official report offered no explanations. Some claimed the men had been captured, slaughtered, their remains hidden in secret ravines. Others spoke of Turkish artillery obliterating them so completely nothing recognizable was left. But the strangest testimony came years later, from the New Zealand engineers who had been watching through field glasses. They insisted the cloud moved against the wind, that it clung to the hills like something alive. And when it lifted, it didn't break apart like mist. It rose as a single solid mass into the sky and vanished. Legends blossomed. Some spoke of divine judgment, like the Angels of Mons, but reversed. This time, no rescue, only disappearance. Others whispered of strange weapons, experiments never recorded. A few went further still. The cloud was no cloud at all, they said, but something not of this earth, a vessel that took the regiment somewhere beyond human reach. One Turkish farmer swore he heard strange humming noises from the hills the night after the men vanished, a vibration in the air that rattled windows. He believed it was not artillery, but something else entirely. Years later, rusted rifles were indeed found, buried deep in a hillside cave miles from the site. Yet the serial numbers were too corroded to trace. Decades after the war, fragments of bones were discovered in a ravine, but no one could prove they belonged to the missing men. The army buried them under one stone, carved with all the names. But the cloud never left the story. Old soldiers told it to their sons. Journalists dug through war diaries. And still today, a few insist the Norfolks never died at all, that they marched somewhere beyond our world and never came back. The Dancing Death of Ypres, April 22, 1915. Ypres. The wind carried a strange green haze across no man's land, low and curling like a living thing. Soldiers leaned from the trenches, squinting at it. Then the first coughs began. Chlorine gas. It rolled toward the Allied lines, a shimmering wall of death. Men shouted warnings, scrambling for rags, water, anything to shield their lungs. But the gas moved faster, searing eyes, burning throats, flooding into dugouts where men huddled in the dark. And then, the laughing started. Witnesses spoke of soldiers staggering from the trenches, eyes wide and shining, coughing foam as they stumbled into the open. Some danced like drunkards, spinning and clawing at the air. Others doubled over, shrieking in voices that no longer sounded human. Through the drifting green clouds, their shapes twisted and lurched like grotesque marionettes. A Canadian nurse wrote later that the wind carried both screams and laughter back to the field hospitals, a chorus so unnatural it froze everyone who heard it. The German troops advancing behind the gas masks paused at what they saw. Through the haze, figures convulsed and jerked in the yellow light, some clawing at their own throats, others clawing skyward as though fighting invisible enemies. The battlefield had become a stage of the damned, men writhing in what looked like mocking celebration. One French soldier, years later, confessed he dreamed of that night until his death. He claimed he saw faces in the gas itself, long, grinning shapes drifting through the green clouds as the men beneath twisted in agony. The survivors never forgot. They said the gas didn't just kill. It played with them first, made them dance, made them laugh. Some swore they saw shapes moving in the clouds that weren't men at all. Figures too tall, too thin, faces stretched in grins wider than human mouths. Hallucinations, the doctor said later. Oxygen starvation. Nerves snapping under terror, but the stories spread through the ranks like fire. The soldiers called it the dancing death. Even after gas masks came, even after the armies grew used to this new horror, men swore that on certain nights, when the wind blew wrong, you could still hear them. The dancers, the laughter, carried through the dark over the empty fields of Ypres. Some historians argue the legend of the dancing death grew because the first gas attack marked the birth of modern chemical warfare, a horror so new, so unnatural, that the human mind turned it into something almost supernatural, a curse carried on the wind.